It's hard to believe that we are now on the 4th installment of the full map series, starting with 00 towers all the way back in December, and today I have for you a full map of each tier 3 tower in BTD5. And let me just say now, this is where things really start to get pretty insane. Now as always, we have the Dart Monkey up first, but now that we're working with 3rd tier upgrades, we'll have to test the left path first, and then do the same with the right path. And in this case, I'm actually curious if the Spike-a-Pult will even get any further than the tier 2 Dart Monkeys did. With it firing a lot more slowly, all the extra pierce their projectile gets is really going to have to make up for that if they actually want to have a chance. And because I was pretty unsure about how far they'd actually make it, I decided not to skip to round 100. Also, I just wanted to point out how funny they all look while they're firing at the balloons together here. But then, I made the mistake of thinking that I didn't need this MIB village, as the Spike-a-Pults actually cannot pop lead balloons. And thus, after losing to round 59, I ran it back with the MIB present until we wouldn't need it anymore, which allowed these Dart Monkeys to get much further. In fact, as you'd probably imagine, everything before true free play, which begins on round 86 in this game, went by without a hitch. And soon after, I did get rid of that MIB village for good, as there are no lead balloons this far into the game. But of course, what you do have a ton of are Moab class balloons that get stronger and faster every round, and once again, I'm not very sure at how good the Spike-a-Pults will be at actually dealing damage to all of them. But we did get past round 100 pretty easily at least, and I honestly forgot just how long each round takes when you're playing on express shipping. But eventually we did make it up to round 110, where they ultimately lost for the first time. And if you're new to this series, I give every tower that makes it into true free play 3 tries to get as far as possible, since the rounds are randomized at this point, and on their second attempt, we were able to get through 110 before ultimately succumbing to 112 this time. And then on the 3rd try, the Spike-a-Pults actually had a crazy clutch where they just barely survived with 11 lives remaining before then being defeated on round 113, marking a very modest 1 round improvement from the tier 2 Dart Monkeys. But I am expecting a lot more from the triple dart upgrade, as it should literally triple their overall damage per second, and beyond that, since the Dart Monkey specialist building gives them explosive darts, I really can get rid of the MIB village immediately. And when it comes to their popping power, I definitely wasn't wrong to expect more out of this upgrade than the tier 3 we got from the left path, as the triple Dart Monkeys easily tore through around 110 without much trouble at all. And they kept on going from there, breaking through 120 and almost making it to 125 before getting overwhelmed just 1 round before. However, this was only their first try of course, and with the second, the triple Dart Monkeys got up to round 127, where they also lost on their final attempt as well. And this marks a far more impressive 15 round improvement from their tier 2 counterpart. And another upgrade that I'm expecting quite a lot from is the Tack Barrier that we get on the left path of our Tack Shooters here, as this is actually pretty well known as a cheap way to shred through Moab class balloons, and the tier 2 Tack Shooters already got up to round 124 as well. And with that in mind, I am going to be skipping to round 100 this time to get us started here as well, and I'll also take a moment with each tower to show what it's gaining from its specialist building being enabled, along with having the tier 3 upgrades on screen as well, just like I have for the last 15 seconds or so. And it really is a good thing that these free play rounds don't have camo or lead balloons, considering the Tack Shooter would be losing to both of those. Now if you're wondering why I gave the towers an MIB village before, when I first did the 00 video, every single tower, besides the Monkey Buccaneer, would have literally failed to round 59 with the camo lead balloons because none of them have a way to pop both those balloon types without any upgrades on them, and I just didn't think that'd be a very interesting video. But with that being said, the Tack Barrier really did make a solid difference for our Tack Shooters, allowing them to surpass round 130 for the first time. Things got pretty interesting when the balloons made a big push to the exit on round 134, resulting in just 8 lives being lost. But then, 136 would prove to be too strong, overwhelming the Tack Barriers for the first time. And on their second try, the Tack Shooters couldn't get any luckier with the balloons being sent their way, as 136 would take them out once again. However, the third try would be a little different, as they first defeated 136, and then the Tack Shooters really clutched up here on round 137, which allowed them to push onwards and not lose until reaching round 139. This marks a 15 round improvement compared to the tier 2 Tack Shooters. And now it's time to see what the Blade Shooter upgrade that we get from the right path is going to be capable of as well. Now, while the Tack Barrier doubled the amount of projectiles that our Tack Shooter fires, the Blade Shooter fires more quickly and doubles the pierce of their projectile from 1 to 2, if I'm not mistaken. They should also have a larger hitbox and therefore miss the balloons less often as well, and thus, this is one of the tests that I'm personally interested in, because I've always assumed that the Tack Sprayer is better overall, but now I can finally get to see it in action. And, as you can tell, getting past round 120 still wasn't difficult for our blade shooters at all. But, just like with the Tack Sprayers, we did have a moment where the balloons made a big push, and this time only took out 2 lives from us total. But unfortunately, it would be just one round after that happened, on 128, that we'd actually lose for the first time. But then, things got pretty crazy, as our second try netted us an extra 4 rounds for the Blade Shooter army, while our third try did the same, bumping us all the way up to round 136, giving them a total improvement of 12 rounds over the tier 2 Tack Shooters themselves, and thus settling the debate finally, although I have to say, both these towers did extremely well, considering how cheap that they are. Also, that was like literally the closest loss I've ever seen for a tower in this entire series, I think. Now, the Sniper Monkey is always an interesting tower in these challenges, and with their specialist building enabled, the 3rd tier upgrade on the left path allows them to do a total of 19 damage per shot. And of course, this tower has global range as well, so as soon as we get started here, they can all work together to instantly destroy each balloon that gets hit. Of course, people always point out during these videos that leaving the snipers all targeted to first is a mistake, and I did try to change the targeting during the tier 2 video, but unfortunately, it actually didn't help us there. But I will try to do the same thing today, with the plan being that once these snipers have failed 3 times with all their targeting on first, I then will change half of their targeting to close in order to allow us to deal damage to more of the balloons at once. But with that said, our sniper army was already doing a good job of tearing through these rounds, allowing them to hit the 130 mark before ultimately getting overwhelmed by balloons just 1 round after that. Then on their second try, the snipers got exactly 1 round further, which is also what happened on their third as well, ultimately bringing them up to round 133. But now it's time to see, if I set about half of our snipers to close, while following a grid-like pattern, will this be enough to get us further? And the reason for leaving so many of the snipers still targeted to first as well, is simply because we'll get overwhelmed by ceramics most likely otherwise. But, as much as I'd wanted this to actually work, we, unfortunately, still lost on round 133, marking a 15 round improvement compared to the tier 2, which is a number I feel like I've been saying a lot so far. And now it's time to see whether the Deadly Precision or the semi-automatic upgrade is actually better, and my money is on the latter, given that it allows the sniper to attack 3 times faster than normal, while Deadly Precision doesn't give it a 3 times extra damage per shot. And I just gotta say, if you've been enjoying the video so far, it's taken me around 6 real life hours just to get this far in, which doesn't include the time to edit, nor the time to write the script either, so dropping a like and sub seriously does go a long way to helping it reach more people in the algorithm. And I know that some of the snipers are tier 4 as well, but I promise you that doesn't make any difference. Literally all it does is give you that supply crate. It doesn't make them any stronger in any way like some tier 4 upgrades do, so that's the only reason why I didn't worry about it. And with that being said, the semi-automatic snipers were also doing a good job here, eventually reaching the round 130 mark for themselves, and sure enough, this isn't where they would end up failing either, eventually getting up to round 135, before ultimately losing for the first time, which I'll admit is a bit less of an improvement than I'd been hoping for. And on the second try, our semi-auto army would actually lose to the same round once again, before pushing to 136 on their third try, where the snipers were so close to surviving before just barely getting overran at the end of it. So I did the same thing again with their targeting, and wouldn't you know it, this actually seemed to be working for us, well, at least for a single round, where the RBE was now 400,000 lower than it had been on their last attempt. And sure enough, just 1 round later, the snipers would lose again, despite me trying the different targeting option. And this gives the semi-automatic an improvement of 19 rounds over the tier 2 snipers. And when it comes to the Boomerang, I'm really not sure what to expect. I tend to not use this tower very often in the first place, and when I do, it's always the other 3rd tier upgrade as opposed to the Glaive Ricochet that I'm buying on them all currently. But I am very curious about what they can pull off though, as I've heard before that the second Boomerang that you get from their specialist building being enabled is actually weaker than the first, with the exception of this upgrade. So, just how far can a full map of Glaive Ricochet Boomers actually get? Well, it certainly didn't take long for them to surpass the tier 2 Boomerangs, as those had failed to just round 106. But what surprised me is just how powerful that the tier 3s were actually looking here. I honestly expected that the Glaive Ricochet upgrade simply wouldn't make that big of a difference, but to say this assumption was incorrect would honestly be an understatement. It wasn't very long before they joined our last 2 towers in surpassing round 130, and this far into the game, you can see that things also tend to get really laggy as well. I'm guessing this has to do with all the calculations that have to be done for each glaive as it ricochets between the balloons. But thankfully, this wasn't going to lead to us crashing, and instead, we actually continued pushing forward as this tower became our first tier 3 to surpass the round 140 mark. But I guess that wasn't impressive enough for them, as 150 would go on to fall as well, which is genuinely insane to me. I'm now really starting to think this upgrade might perform better than the other tier 3 Boomerang, which I expected a lot from already. And sure enough, the Glaive Ricochet also surpassed round 160 as well, while only having lost 4 lives total. And what I found extra amazing is how on round 162, they only lost another 104 lives, and again at the end of 163, just 5 lives this time. So this upgrade also has an amazing ability to clutch up as well, and I can only imagine how well it would perform if we had like a million extra lives. And when it was all said and done, they continued pushing forwards all the way until we reached round 168, where we had just 166 lives remaining, all of which just barely got wiped out at the very end of the round. But unfortunately, on both their second and third try, the Glaive Ricochet was not able to defeat this round either. But that still marks an absolutely insane 62 round improvement compared to the tier 2 boomerangs. And when it comes to the Bionic Boomer, the game says that it attacks twice as fast, but I swear that has to be an understatement when I watch a 2-2 and 2-3 attack together, which is why I was honestly expecting this to be the upgrade that surprised people first. And the last tower alone took 90 minutes despite me skipping to round 100, so I hope you can understand me skipping to 120 with this one. Which was definitely the right call, as sure enough, the Bionic Boomerang also tore through these rounds like nothing without causing the same kind of lag either. And pretty soon, they also broke past the round 140 mark, which really makes the tier 3 Boomerang a very strong leader overall so far. But sadly, this upgrade ended up failing for the first time right before they could get to the round 150 mark. But thankfully on our second attempt, the Bionic Boomerang pushed another 5 rounds, not failing until 154 this time, before ultimately getting 1 round further on their third. And this still marks a very impressive 49 round improvement over the tier 2 Boomerangs. And I'm also expecting a decent amount from the double shot ninjas, given that, as their name would suggest, they'll now be able to fire 2 shurikens instead of just 1, which should effectively double the Ninja Monkey's overall damage per second. And considering that they already got up to round 125 as tier 2 towers, I really think that the ninjas should have a solid performance here. You might also notice these activated abilities that appear in the bottom left corner, and for those unaware, that's actually one of the perks that we get from their specialist building being enabled, as each ninja we have placed can now spawn a 0-0 clone of itself, which honestly won't be all that helpful at this point. Now, as I had been expecting, our army of double shot ninja monkeys started off doing pretty well. They were holding back the balloons quite easily as we surpassed the round 110 mark, but honestly, getting past that point started to look like more and more of a chore for these ninjas. By round 120, the balloons are already pushing quite far against them, and while I knew we wouldn't lose before beating the tier 2 ninja monkeys, I still had been expecting more out of this upgrade. Of course, round 125 did fall for them at least, and we were able to keep pushing for a bit after that, but ultimately, the double shot ninjas ended up losing for the first time on just round 130. And on the second attempt, while they did defeat that round, the ninjas then failed just 1 round later, which is where they would also fail in their third try as well. So now, I am going to do an attempt where I use all the shadow clones, which actually is working out here on round 131, but to be fair, that RBE is a good bit lower than it had been before, and sure enough, despite me slowing down the game and making sure to stay on top of activating all the shadow ninjas, we still lost to 132 regardless, marking a pretty disappointing 7 round improvement compared to the tier 2s. Now, when I was upgrading them all into flash bombs to test the other third tier path, I actually ran out of money despite giving myself 1 million cash already, so hopefully that means this upgrade is also going to be more powerful as well. The flash bombs definitely seem to be doing a good job of containing all the smaller balloons at least, and honestly overall, I'd say the ninja does look better here as well. And sure enough, they ended up pushing past round 130, albeit not that much further, but first, my laptop battery actually got low and ended up dying. However, somehow, OBS never stopped actually recording, so I was able to bring the game back up before we ultimately failed to round 136 for the first time. And on the second attempt, this is where the Ninja Monkey would fail as well. However, their third try saw them get a relatively easy RB to deal with, allowing them to beat 136 before getting an even easier round 137, which of course they'd also conquer. Then I realized their specialist building was no longer enabled due to something I actually had to test, so I fixed that, and they also survived 138 before also surprising me by beating 139 as well. It wouldn't be until round 141 this time that they lost on their third attempt, so now it was time to try the Shadow clones. And I can't say I was surprised when they made no difference at all. But at least that marks a 16 round improvement for the Flash Bomb Ninja Monkeys over their tier 2 counterpart. And from one bomb to the next, it's now time to see what the Cluster Bomb upgrade on our bomb tower will be capable of. And normally, this would be one of the very few towers that actually needs an MIB to survive even during free play, but thankfully, its specialist building does allow the tower to pop black balloons and zebra balloons without needing to rely on shrapnel, which of course, we lose when upgrading to the cluster bomb. I also really hate when I have to sell a tower after accidentally upgrading to tier 4, cause in certain cases like this one right here, it's painfully difficult to replace that tower afterwards. But I am definitely interested to see what this upgrade will actually be capable of. It could really go either way, but with the Cluster Bomb having such a huge hitbox that can damage so many balloons at once, I think it might end up doing better than you'd expect. You probably also know that this tower gets an activated ability of its own from the specialist building being enabled, which will briefly double the bomb tower's range. And of course, I'll try it out once we have failed, but that ended up taking a pretty long time, as the cluster bombs joined the club of towers that could surpass round 140, and they didn't stop there either, eventually making their way through round 150 before ultimately failing to round 154 for the first time. And on their second try, the cluster bombs got through this round, but they couldn't push any further, with them also failing to round 155 on their third attempt. So then it was time to try their activated ability, which did allow us to beat round 155 this time. However, the hope was short-lived, with us failing just one round after that. But 156 is still an improvement of 33 rounds over the tier 2 bomb tower. And I'm expecting even more from the other third tier bomb, given that its name is literally Moab Mauler. And with that in mind, I started us off on round 135 this time to save a bit of time, which was definitely the right call, as they were still easily tearing through the rounds ahead of them. And thus, it was no surprise when they beat round 150 before surpassing the cluster bombs as well, pushing us up to round 160, and finally dethroning the glaive ricochet boomerangs by surpassing their record as well. But you can see this was nearing the end of the Moab Maulers, and sure enough, they ended up losing for the first time to round 172. Our second attempt did allow the Maulers to push their way up to round 173, however this really became their true limit, as they not only failed there on their third attempt, but also the bomb towers couldn't beat 173 when I used their activated abilities either. But that still marks an improvement of 50 rounds compared to the tier 2 bombs. Now, the Ice Monkeys only just became relevant in the last video when they gained the ability to attack, and I'm definitely curious about their third tier upgrades as well. I'm sure the Arctic Wind's ability to slow down regular balloons within their range will definitely help against those, but also, with the fact that the range becomes so much larger, we should also survive a bit longer against the Moab class as well. But ultimately, this tower still only does 1 damage per attack, so we shouldn't expect anything too insane. And thus, I actually started it off on just round 86, where you can see the game is all nice and laggy for us now. Which of course, wasn't going away, but luckily for you all, I can just speed things up and you don't gotta worry about it. I will say though, I could barely even click on towers when I tried to check some pop counts on round 101, and by the time we pushed up to 107, it seriously looked like the game was about to crash. But thankfully, this isn't Bloons Monkey City, so we kept on pushing until they just barely ended up losing at the end of round 109, and no joke, it took 85 minutes to get here from round 86. Now, the Arctic Wind was able to beat round 109 when we tried the second time, but 110 would prove to be too difficult for it here, which remained true in the third attempt as well. This means an improvement of 6 rounds compared to the tier 2 Ice Monkeys. But surely the Ice Shard upgrade will allow them to do more, right? I mean, the shards can't attack Moab class balloons normally, but if there are regular balloons underneath them, they will attack those and deal massive damage to the blimps as well, which you can see happening with these Moabs getting shredded super fast. And I really thought this would be super effective in getting us way further with the ice, but somehow, I kid you not, this tower failed for the first time on just round 105. I actually don't understand this, and they couldn't get any further on their second or third attempts either, so I guess that marks an improvement of just 1 round? But they shouldn't feel too bad, cause the Glue Gunner is guaranteed to make no progress from when it gained the ability to pop balloons as a tier 2, since they simply cannot do anything against Moab class balloons at all. As you can see here, both tier 3 glues will ignore the first Moab on round 46, and thus hard capping them to this round no matter how many that you get. And now we've switched over to Flooded Lane in order to test our first water-based tower, which is the Buccaneer. And I definitely think it could perform quite well here with the Destroyer upgrade, given that it makes the main fireball projectile fire extremely quickly now. Although I don't think it has any effect on the grape shot, which is probably what made the Buccaneers jump from round 88 up to 115 when they went from 0-0 to 1-1 towers in the first two videos. And for those wondering, I'm pretty certain that the new map that they added to BTD5 recently wouldn't be better for water-based towers, since some of the map is still taken up by land at the top, and I also don't think it's any longer than Flooded Lane either. Now, as you can see here, they really should start calling this tower the CPU Destroyer, given the amount of lag that it comes with, but at least we were getting through these rounds pretty well, and I honestly can't complain too much since this map does go more quickly than express shipping. I can only imagine how far the Buccaneers could get there if I knew how to modify the game and place them on land. But with that being said, they were still able to push past round 120, which is the furthest that this tower has ever made it, but honestly, I was a little bit disappointed when they failed for the first time on just round 126. I really thought that the Destroyer would make a bigger difference, and the second try didn't get us any further either, but on the third, we were able to push our way up to round 128 for an 11 round improvement over the tier 2 Bucks. And now I really don't think that turning our fireball into a bomb will make much difference, which definitely became evident as we pushed forward, and it's clear to me now that the grape shot definitely carries this tower super hard. And thus, they actually failed just one round after the tier 2s did for the first time, before increasing that to 2 rounds on their second try, which they couldn't improve with the third. And coming back to express shipping with the Monkey Ace, I'm definitely curious how the never miss targeting will affect things. Which I say because the Monkey Aces already get machine gunners from their specialist building, which have the ability to target balloons and also fire quite quickly. So, I'm not sure how much difference that this upgrade can actually make for them. But with that said, they started off performing well, which I'd expect given that the tier 2 ace was able to make it up to round 117, but as we started to get closer to that mark with the never miss targeting, I definitely began to realize this upgrade really isn't going to be making much difference. On round 117 specifically, you can see that the balloons are already pushing quite far against our defenses, and while we did survive here, it would be just 2 rounds later that we failed for the first time. And I don't think this has actually happened yet either, but on both the second and the third try, the Monkey Ace literally made no progress past that point either, giving it the same 2 round improvement that the cannon ship had right before. But I think that the Operation Dartstorm is going to be a little different, and well, this definitely is. The game has now been reduced to a snail's pace with the sheer amount of projectiles that are constantly on screen. And while I thought that skipping to round 110 would be enough, in hindsight, I honestly regret not skipping even further, because I was underestimating just how insane that this upgrade was really going to be, not with just how laggy it made things, but how far that it would actually push the ace as well. Getting past round 120 was absolutely no problem for them, and things only continued from there. 130 also fell with no problem, and soon after, well, maybe not soon, but eventually, they got past round 140 as well. And ultimately, the ODS Monkey Ace was able to get all the way up to round 154 before finally failing for the first time. And unlike their tier 3 brethren, the ODS would then get another 6 rounds out of their second try, making them one of the few that have actually reached the 160 mark. However, the third try could not get them any further, but 43 rounds is quite the improvement over the tier 2 ace. And now we have a tower that I'm sure many of you have been waiting to see in its third tier, which is of course the Super Monkey. And for everyone who's still watching, I'd really like for you to try and guess what round you think the Sun Gods and Robo Monkeys will get to in the comments, or at the very least, which one you think will get further. But needless to say, this is going to be insane. And it's also kind of funny how the Sun God is the only tower that's not possible to accidentally upgrade into a 4th tier since the game gives you this warning first. And to get us started, I immediately skipped around 150 because I already know anything before that would simply be trivial. And sure enough, our Sun God army was easily ripping through everything without even letting the balloons make much progress. And considering how large that the range is on these towers, you know it's insane when a good portion of the map hasn't even had to engage in the battle yet, as we're already surpassing the bomb tower's record. And it wasn't too long after that before we were nearing round 200, although at this point, you can see a lot more Sun Gods are having to work, and the map gets completely filled with sunbeams as well, which it looks pretty cool, I really can't lie. And with them having infinite pierce, it was still going to be a long time before this tower would actually fail, so let's just take a second to appreciate this time lapse of the balloons slowly inching their way closer and closer to the exit. And I also want to give a huge thank you to everyone who's still watching the video. As you all know, a ton of time and effort really goes into making these possible, and it really does mean the world to me that we have a community who's invested in each project the same way that I am as well. And with that being said, after about 3 hours of intense gameplay, the Sun Gods would surpass the round 250 mark, but you can see that they truly were nearing their end now. And sure enough, round 254 would finally serve them their first loss, but our second try did net an extra 3 rounds before they push an extra round up to 258 with their third try, marking a 110 round improvement over the tier 2 Super Monkeys, which doesn't even feel right to say. And with that in mind, I started the Robo Monkeys on round 200 to save a bit of time, which might sound a little ambitious. However, as you can see, they were still handling these rounds quite well. And the only reason I knew this would be fine is because I already did the Super Monkeys a month ago and accidentally deleted the footage. But it definitely surprised me at the time that the Robo Monkey could be somewhat competitive with the Sun Gods, and they have a much higher pierce than I initially realized. And thus, they wouldn't end up failing for the first time until round 232. And pretty similarly to the Sun God, our second try allowed them to get an extra 4 rounds before squeezing one more round out on their third. Round 237 is still an improvement of 89 rounds over the regular Plasma Vision. And if you guys saw the last video, you'll probably know I'm not looking forward to the Wizard Monkey since its lightning upgrade crashes the game. But with the tornado that we're adding from its 3rd tier upgrade here, and the extra attack we get from its specialist building, our wizards are going to be firing 5 unique projectiles at once now, which I believe is the most of any tower in the game if you don't include the temple with its sacrifices. But I started us off on round 111, and it didn't take long until the game had already crashed here on round 115 for the first time. Then it happened again on round 118, and I won't make you guys sit and watch every crash, but something else very important happened as well, which is that the Tornado Wizard Monkeys ended up failing for the first time to just round 138, which doesn't make any sense given that the tier 2s made it 3 rounds further than that in the last video. And I'm pretty certain of what happened, but I wanted to give them their other 2 tries, with the first one netting us no progress at all. However, the third try did allow the wizards to push up to round 140. And the reason that this happened is because during the tier 2 video, I had an MIB village in the center of our wizards, which I recently learned actually glitches out their fireball projectile and essentially doubles it. Well, the MIB doesn't, but the extra pierce you get from the Monkey 4 upgrade before it does, so naturally, I retested the tier 2 wizards once again, this time making sure not to have an MIB village, and of course it kept on crashing, but eventually, I found that they only got to round 133 this time on their first try, which they couldn't beat with their second either. And on the third, they did push 1 round further, but the MIB village had clearly made a bit of a difference before. And now we know that the tornado upgrade doesn't make the wizard worse or something at least as well. But even without any glitches, I knew that the dragon's breath upgrade was going to be pretty insane here, so I started them off on round 136, and now we get the added bonus of tons of lag on top of the fact that the game is going to be crashing. But you can see just how easily they're tearing through the ZOMGs. So I skipped up to 157 to save some time, and even here the wizards really aren't struggling yet, so then I went up to 171, and this was definitely closer to their limit, so I let the game run from here. But it was definitely frustrating to have it running so slowly and still crashing on me now, especially as I got past round 180. In fact, something quite interesting happened here on round 181 when we literally ran out of lives and had the game crash at the exact same time, leading to this weird state where it couldn't actually show us the game over screen despite our life count being 0. And that definitely counts as their first attempt, with the Wizard Monkeys also losing to 181 on their second, but here you can see as I tried to test them again, the Wizards could beat a single round, get pretty far into the second one, and then the game would crash. So it took a while, but eventually, they ultimately failed to round 184 with their third try, marking an improvement of 50 rounds over what the tier 2 was able to accomplish today. And it's pretty funny how the village can do so much for other towers, but it certainly cannot help itself, as neither tier 3 village can attack the balloons at all, meaning that the furthest they could get is round 27 if you use fast track mode to skip the first 25. And normally I would have also lumped the farm in with this part, but you guys have been wanting me to try the Healthy Bananas Premium upgrade, which allows you to earn 1 extra life per farm and upgrade, meaning that each tier 3 farm I can fit on the map would net us 6 extra lives per round. And express shipping actually isn't the best map for this, because ironically enough, I believe the map that allows you to fit the most farms in the game is literally Cash Money, with all this open space on both sides being perfect to line them up. And in total, I got down 46 if I counted them right, which should be 276 extra lives per round. And obviously what's going to happen is that for the first several rounds, we'll actually gain lives from this, but very quickly, the RB is going to start to catch up with us. At first though, we really were building up a decent life surplus, and I was surprised when the banana farms ended up getting all the way to around 40 with their healthy bananas premium. Now getting back to the more serious stuff, we have the Mortar Monkey, which of course will now be able to target balloons like a regular tower, thanks to its specialist building. And I know this tower hasn't been very strong in the past. Oh, that was some thunder there. So I started them off on round 91, and something I've always noticed about this tower is that it likes to create lag spikes occasionally when a bunch of smaller balloons get destroyed at once. But also, it just takes forever to get through each round with this tower in general. And I also have to say, the Balloon Buster mortars were looking even weaker than I had originally expected, because the tier 2s were able to get to round 96 before, so I already knew we had an issue when these mortars had already failed on just round 93. The second try did allow them to reach 96, before ultimately failing to round 97 on their third, which would certainly make a lot of sense if the tier 2 mortars were also being glitched out by the Monkey Fort Village before. And here's the perfect way to test it. You see, the 2-3 mortar literally only gains the ability to remove camo from balloons, so it won't be any stronger, and therefore will actually show us how the tier 2 mortar would have performed without a village last time as well. And yeah, sure enough, they ended up failing to just round 90, which could not be surpassed with their second or third tries either. But I am really excited to test out the tier 3 Dartling Gunners. Just like with the Mortar Monkey, this tower is going to have global range, but also, the Dartling Gunner of course has a super high rate of fire and is actually quite strong overall as well. And I'm also really curious to see whether the laser cannon or hydropods end up being able to perform better here. And I just gotta say, these laser cannons look absolutely insane when they're all firing together, and with such high pierce as well, they're super powerful, allowing us to absolutely obliterate the balloons round after round. But this is about the point in the video where I feel like I really start running out of things to say, cause like you can only repeat yourself about the round milestones and all that so many times before it really feels repetitive, which I'm sure is especially true for all you guys, considering that you're watching all of this footage condensed into a video that's probably around 40 minutes long. But yeah, I mean, the laser cannon Dartling Gunners were going absolutely insane even past the round 150 mark, which means they should be joining some pretty exclusive territory soon. I also gotta wonder, like, how many people have tried random things like this in BTD5, but they just never recorded it back when the game was still new? I'm sure someone else out there has had ideas like this before, but sorry, I'm rambling. However, we were able to get past round 170, with the laser cannons finally succumbing to round 173 for the first time. So I tried taking control of them, but still lost the same round, and honestly, I think with such a high pierce, it's better to just keep this tower pointed at the upper left corner, where balloons spend the most time overall. And on our second try, they got one round further, which had a really high RBE, and that remained true on the third as well, leaving us with round 174 for a 40 round improvement. So how do you think the Hydro Rocket pods will stack up? Well, they certainly look different, but this explosive effect they produce actually looks really cool with so many rockets firing at once. And this tower was also doing extremely well, with it still looking quite comfortable as we approach round 170, and sure enough, they were able to ultimately surpass the laser cannons as well. But it was going to be pretty close, and the Hydro Rocket pods lost around 183 on their first try. Then on their second, they were able to push another 2 rounds forward before barely clutching up here on round 186 during the final attempt, which allowed them to ultimately settle on round 187 for a really impressive 53 round improvement. And now we're going to go from one of the least laggy towers to easily the most, which is of course the Spike Factory here, although those ODS Monkey Aces were giving them a run for their money earlier. But hey, at least they do get an extra 50% damage to all spike piles and spiked balls from their specialist building. Wait, is that really a good thing if that'll just make it take even longer? Well, regardless, you can see just how quickly they fill up the map and immediately start lagging out the game, and once I skipped around 100, I knew that things were going to be looking like this for a long time. And of course, it took a while to progress, but on round 109, I tried to check the pop count of one of our spiked ball factories, and had to literally wait until round 110 began just for the game to finally react. Pretty soon I realized I should have skipped further than round 100 when I had the chance, but now we're at a point in which I don't want to risk going too far. So I simply waited it out until more than 3 hours since we had began, where they failed for the first time to round 132. And I guess the Spike Factories wanted to prove they're good at counting, as the second attempt got to 133 and the third up to 134, for a solid 19 round improvement over the tier 2s. And with the Moab Shredder spikes, I skipped around 116 knowing that they should be a good deal stronger, given that their name is literally Moab Shredder, and I have some 4th tiers mixed in, but I didn't bother worrying about those since they aren't any stronger without using the activated ability. And all in all, they got up to exactly around 150 before failing for the first time, which is also where they lost on the second, but our third attempt would see the biggest jump from a single try ever, getting all the way up to round 157. And it took over 7 hours just to get through this one tower, so I was certainly glad to move on. But that does mark a rather impressive improvement, which, dang, that was like a tongue twister to say, of 42 rounds. And now we have arguably the most broken tower in all of Bloons Tower Defense 5, but unfortunately that doesn't apply here. However, I am curious to see if the Razor Rotors can really make much of a difference for the helicopter, given that most of this tower's damage is generally coming from the 4 darts that they fire with every shot. I also had to be pretty careful to make sure I actually upgraded all of them, since the Razor Rotor doesn't really have a unique look compared to the tier 2 helicopters. And I gotta say, it's also pretty funny to watch the helicopters try to make their way towards the balloons during these early rounds when they don't have enough targets to focus on. But of course, that sorted itself out as soon as I skipped around 100, and in my experience, pursuit mode is an effective way to get the helicopters pretty far, but once they lose, I will also try switching them over to follow mouse as well. But in the meantime, the helis were doing pretty well. However, it wouldn't be too long before the pursuit AI made a small mistake on round 114 and accidentally allowed ceramics to blast through the exit. And on the second try, the same thing actually happened. However, our third attempt would allow us to reach round 116, where the helicopters simply got overrun by Moabs that they couldn't have really done anything about. So then I switched them all over to follow mouse, but I'm not gonna lie, when I was trying to follow the balloons myself, I ended up doing the same thing that pursuit mode had by allowing a bunch of ceramics to pass through the exit. But I was also curious if putting all the helicopters in the upper left corner might actually allow them to get further, and sure enough, that did actually make it up to round 118, where I then lost again while trying to control the helicopters myself as well. And that marks an improvement of just 3 rounds over the tier 2s, but I wonder if the downdraft helicopters will be better since they should be able to keep ceramic balloons from reaching the exit. But this really makes no sense to me because somehow they actually did worse than the tier 1 and 2 helicopters had, failing on just round 106 with their first try, before making it to 108 on the second and third. And I also never noticed how the helicopters will keep trying to follow the balloons even after you've already lost, but I did move them into the upper left corner again, which allowed the downdraft helicopters to get up to round 109. And now I was sure the MIB village must have made the difference here, but when I tested it out, a full map of tier 2 helicopters placed in the upper left corner got to round 97 with no MIB village. And I used the bigger beacons premium upgrade in order to make it so that this MIB could cover basically every helicopter on the map, and still, we only got 1 round further, which, keep in mind, usually we do get a round further when I do a second try anyways, so basically none of the difference can be attributed to that village, and I'm really confused as to what happened now. But I'm sure the engineer is going to be a lot more straightforward, although upgrading it certainly isn't, because there are like a million sentry turrets in our way. And you'll notice they look different than normal as well, which is thanks to the Engineer Specialist building turning them into red super sentries. And after some rummaging, I eventually found them all, but I know there's also going to be a good bit of lag from the cleansing foam upgrade that we're buying right now, so I started us off around 116 in order to save some time, knowing that the tier 2s had already gotten pretty far. And at first, the engineers were tearing through things quite well, and honestly I can't even complain about this frame rate after some of the other towers I've had to deal with up to this point. And with that said, I was also pretty surprised when the cleansing foam engineers first failed to just round 132, which I say because that's actually how far the tier 2s had made it themselves. However, on their second try, the engineers did push their way up to round 136 before ultimately getting to 138 on their third, so I guess this upgrade ended up being less impactful than I had expected. And of course you know that would be a 6 round improvement because I just told you how far the tier 2s had got. But the sprockets could do more for us, given that they will make the sentries fire faster than before, which are honestly the main horsepower behind this tower. And beyond that, they also don't cause any extra lag either, which is definitely nice, and sure enough, it wasn't too long before they pushed their way past round 130, and soon after that, the sprocket engineers had surpassed the cleansing foam as well, ultimately reaching round 143 on their first try. And they weren't done here, as the engineers then pushed that up to round 148, however they couldn't get further with their third try. But that's an improvement of 16 rounds for them at least. Now of course the Bloonchipper is limited in the same way as our Glue Gunner was, with neither of its tier 3 upgrades being able to attack the Moab class balloons, meaning it would also lose to round 46. although the 4th tier is going to be super interesting to watch in the next video. And that finally brings us to the Monkey sub, which has a left path upgrade that actually allows the tower to submerge itself. Only problem is that it doesn't actually do any damage in that mode, and when not submerged, it acts exactly the same as the tier 2 sub, so I'm skipping over that to the right path upgrade with the ballistic missile. And their airburst darts will be splitting into 4 instead of just 3, thanks to the Submarine Specialist building, so with the addition of another projectile, I definitely think they can get quite far. However, that also means more lag than ever as well, with the Submarine's advanced intel upgrade that you get at tier 2, allowing all of them to fire at once. But of course, I was plenty used to it at this point, so I just sat back and let the Submarines do their thing, which was going quite well for a while. But honestly, I was kinda surprised when they lost to round 137 for the first time, given that the tier 2s had made it to round 131. I guess I thought the missile would make a bigger difference. I also just noticed how the lag gets way better whenever the balloons are making a bigger push and destroying a lot of the projectiles more quickly. And with that said, they ended up getting to round 138 on their second try before just barely breaking the 140 mark on their third, for an overall improvement of 9 rounds compared to the tier 2. And here's the final leaderboard for you guys. I figured what I would do is first show how the left path upgrades did, and of course the Super Monkey was far and away first place, but we also had some really good competition below that, with the Dartling Gunner getting just past the Boomerang, and then the Bomb Tower was a pretty clear 4th, but then also it gets really close after that, and you guys can take a second to check out the leaderboard if you want, but I'm going to take a few seconds to leave it on screen, and then I'm going to go over to the right side here, where you can see again, the Super Monkey was far and away the best tower, with the Dartling Gunner also taking second place, but this time we actually had the Wizard in third, thanks to the really strong performance from the Dragon's Breath. The Bomb was in 4th place now, also doing really well, and the Ace actually managed to sneak its way into 5th with that super laggy ODS performance. But again, if you want to take a second to pause and check out all the results, I really appreciate all you guys watching. Thank you so much for being part of this journey, and here's another video that YouTube thinks you might like as well.